Let's go and create a new sheet for our next bar chart. But before we actually make that, let's talk a little bit about how we're going to build out this visualization. We're going to take advantage of two fields in our data set called measure names and measure values. Now you'll notice these are not native to the data set. These are automatically inputted by Tableau. And Tableau automatically creates these fields so that we can build specific types of visualizations. Our measure values field down here is a field that contains all of the measures in our data set. So if I were to grab this and bring it out, you will notice it's going to bring in all of my measures. Remember, the measures are going to be all of the fields that show up below that line. And they're also going to be aggregated. So you'll notice we have counts and sums. So those are all of the measure values. What the measure names field is that contains the names of all of the measures in our data. So notice on our filters shelf here, I have my measure names. So if I were to right click on this, let's go to edit filter. You'll notice in here we have all of these different fields that relate to all of the fields that we see over here in our measures. So as I unselect some of these, actually I'm just going to go ahead and click none, and then let's maybe take these three. When I click apply, notice that those are the only three that are left here in my measure values card. So we also have a measure values card that shows up when we create visualizations that have measure names or measure values in them. Or click OK and get out of there. Another thing I can do with my measure values card now is I can add specific measures to it. So let's say I want to create a bar chart that shows the number of admits for the age groups here. So what I can do is I want this to be a horizontal bar chart. So I'm going to go ahead and click my swap rows and columns. So that's going to give me my measure values as the length of my bars. And then to get each one of my measure values here broken up so that it's an individual row, I'm going to grab my measure names and drop that on the row shelf. So what that's going to do is that's going to give me a new row for each one of my measure names. So now I see that I have 0 through 4, 13 through 17, 18 through 24, 25 through 34. So I can either click and drag and drop into my measure values card, or I can right click on my measure names pill in my filter shelf and then click edit filter. And then in here, I can go ahead and select the different measures that I want to see. So let's go ahead and grab all of our admits. So I only want to look at the admits. I'm not going to click this admit all ages because that's going to encompass all of the ages that we already have. So I'm just going to click admit 0 to 4 and then all the way up to 75. Remember, inside this window, I can click apply if I want to see what that's going to look like behind the scenes, or you can go ahead and click OK, and then that accepts the changes. I'm going to go ahead and click OK. You'll notice we have a bar chart here showing the different admittances for my different age groups. A couple things I want to point out now that we have our bar chart going on is you'll notice our admittance age groups aren't quite in order. It starts with admit 04, then goes 13, 17. What you'll notice is that our headers also match what we see over here in my measure values card. So if I want to rearrange these, what I can do is I can come over here to my measure values card. What I'm going to do is grab my sum of my admit 5 to 12. And notice as I'm moving it up there, each pill kind of gets bumped down a little bit. And I get a little orange arrow showing up here to the left. That lets me know that I'm about to drop this admit 5 to 12 between that 0, 4 and the 13, 17. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now it looks like these are going to be in order. I'm going to undo that real quick just so we can see what happens if I, a typical scenario. So let's say I'm going to rearrange this, and instead of getting that orange arrow, in my mind, I think I'm about to drop it between these two, but what Tableau is going to do is it's actually going to replace that 0, 4 with my 5, 12. So if you're following along, there's a chance that happens to you. That's okay. Remember, just hit the undo button and then that'll bring you back here. If you don't like working with the pills over on the measure values card, another way to rearrange these is to come over here on the actual visualization itself. And here you can grab the headers and then rearrange the headers. That seems to be a little bit easier. Tableau gives you that black underline, and that lets you know exactly where you're going to be placing that field. All right, so here we have a bar chart of our different admittance levels for our different age groups. Now, we're going to be talking about what we would call a stacked bar. And so a stacked bar chart, remember, we have two different dimensions that we are breaking things up by. So notice in this case, one dimension we are breaking things up by is our age groups. And now what I want to do is let's see what each one of our admittance levels look like by year. In order to make this a stacked bar chart, what I want to do is I want to grab my date field. Remember, Tableau is going to default to year. And I'm going to click and drag it and drop it right here on my color button. So what Tableau is going to do is it's going to break up each one of those age groups by the specific years using color. So when I release date, notice I get a color legend now that shows that 2020 is blue, 2021 is orange, and then 2022 is shown here in red. So we see that the different values for each one of my age groups are now broken up by color. If we wanted to show this as a little bit more of like a quote unquote stacked bar chart, we could swap our rows and columns here. Notice our labels down here aren't too long. Probably what I would do is come up here to my fit menu, and then I would click fit width. Notice what that's going to do is that's going to spread out my visualization so that it takes up the whole sheet. And now I see that each one of my headers comes in without having to do any kind of line breaks, or I'm not having to squish any of those labels. So here we have a stacked bar chart. Again, what I want to do for this, I'm going to come down here where it says sheet 2. We're going to call this a stacked bar chart.